Hello, everybody. Ani, glad to have you all here. And I'm excited to see so many new faces in here. And I'm really looking forward to the questions that'll come toward the end. So thank you so much for joining. And, a big thanks to Leah for putting this graphic together. Uh, she used some of my Ojibwe florals, which is really fun. I love to see how people remix them. So thank you so much for that. I really love how it came out. Uh, so, um, I was born in Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I'm a member of the Chippewas Rama First Nation, and I grew up in the United States, growing up in Miami, Florida, and Corvallis, Oregon. And my family would do big road trips every year to see our family, just almost every summer, um, uh, to see our family in Ontario. And so I feel like I'm part of a lot of different people in a lot of different places. And I think, like I'm Native and white, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's many more people that make me who I am as well. Growing up in Miami, Florida, there was a lot of, Latin American influences, Afro-Caribbean, all these different kinds of people, many different people coming together in that place. And I also feel like, in Corvallis as well, very different demographics, but there's many different people that also shaped me into who I am. And so, I owe, friends of the family and all that to make me who I am, relatives, different people you meet in life. And so I just want to acknowledge that because I feel like it's an important part that shapes me who I am. And, moving here to Santa Fe, it's a very intertribal place. There's a very strong indigenous presence in the state of New Mexico. And so I'm really glad to call Ogopoge or Santa Fe home. So you might be wondering, who are the Anishinaabe? Well, it includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Algonquin, and other, related people or like subgroups of that as well. This is a map that I, found on Wikipedia that shows the distribution of our languages. And so you can get a sense for just how large the range of our people is. There's even some people who are relocated down into Oklahoma, as you can see on the map. So I'm part of a pretty large group of people, all things considered. A little bit about Ogopoge. It is an international intertribal hub for Indigenous arts and cultures. And I think by being here, being around people who are very proud of their cultures, it in turn has made me be more proud of mine and understand more where I come from as well. It's like encouraged me to dig a little deeper. And so you can see on this map here, like all the different nations that are in the state. For a little bit about my creative practice, I really do a lot of different things: graphic design, illustration, writing, photography, visual art, wearable art. But for today's talk, I'm going to mostly speak about the work I do that's Anishinaabe focused. But I do want to say a little bit, though, about kind of where I'm coming from as a creative. I have a commitment to my intertribal community, which means I need to learn about the diverse cultural contexts and visual and material cultures of the individuals and peoples I write about, depict, and promote. It's important to engage humbly and listen, understand my limits as a person, facilitate the telling of accurate information and convey respectful representation, be aware of broader issues in Indian country and structural issues at large. And then I also have a commitment to my Anishinaabe community, which includes learning about and engaging with our culture, researching and understanding history, and deep diving into our visual and material culture. It's also important for me to maintain and develop connections with the Chippewas Rama First Nation, as well as Anishinaabe people more broadly. I try to use design, illustration, and art as a way to promote sovereignty, understanding, cultural reclamation, and pride. And I try to design according to values of respect, reciprocity, and generosity. And so there's a little bit of insight into my process of research and how I go about things. When I am doing my research, I might be using something like, family collections, looking at community collections, connecting with other artists and taking classes is really important, for that hands-on understanding and knowledge. Looking at tribal websites, going to cultural centers, looking at museum collections, whether in person or online, checking out art shows and seeing what other artists are doing. reading books, journals, and articles, looking at historic paintings and historic photographs, checking out Google and Pinterest. But of course, you always have to be careful on source and make sure, you're looking at legit information. And then also keeping an eye on contemporary developments, like on Instagram and Facebook. There's a lot of artists that are really doing a lot of very interesting combination of materials and works. And this is all kind of like a renaissance that's happening now, new ideas, but rooted in our cultures. One thing that's important for me to think about is respectful use of imagery. What was the original context? What's the meaning of the image? What was the intention of the object? Is the knowledge or usage restricted? And so, that's something that's kind of tricky to navigate sometimes, I think, especially when we're dealing with some aspect of culture loss, like trying to figure out, okay, what's the right thing to do in the situation. But I think trying to understand something as deeply as possible, to know cultural taboos around something is like really important. And I think you can make your own decisions on things, but it's good for it to be coming from an informed place. One thing I use as an example is Thunderbird and underwater panther. You will see a lot of Thunderbird imagery kind of widely spread, right? And underwater panther to some degree, though these are very powerful entities within Anishinaabe cosmology. And so it's something to be mindful of, that there's people who have used a different imagery in different ways. I've seen quill work of underwater panther on a quill box that was, sold to the tourist industry. And one can wonder, like, well, what's the meaning of that? Is it okay to do that? Is it not? So there's these sorts of questions that I think are really important to ask, but I really think knowing as much as you can about original context is important. And sometimes, that can take different forms, talking to community members, doing your best, maybe even, praying or smudging through a process too, if you need to. So anyway, looking at the cultural components, visual and material elements, things that I look at are rock art, petroglyphs and pictographs, birch bark items, quill work, beadwork, ribbon work, floral imagery, textiles, basketry, looking at the line work of our art and writing, personal articles, clothing, color schemes, woodland schools, and more. Like, there's so many things that you can tap into as an artist. One of the things, of course, is looking at rock art and petroglyphs and seeing like the materiality that's being used, seeing the bread, the textures, the forms that are, within these things, and trying to understand that. Looking at spirit lines, heart lines, and internal structure, which you can see in this recreation of a petition, where all these people are joined in heart and mind with the leader, which is the crane, and that's representative of the chief, the Chippewa chiefs, and he's the head of it. So they're all kind of there, kind of coming together. And these different imagery are symbolic of clan symbols, right? So things like that, are what I look to when I'm creating my work, looking at certain pictographs. So this is something to be mindful of too, because some of the imagery might be limited or restricted to particular people. So I think it's important to make sure you're as respectful as possible and moving forward in a good way. But there are certain sources that are out there. And so I'm aware of those, and I've done research on that. I look at birch bark, sweetgrass, and quill work. These are some things that are from my family's collection, from our nation, different artists have made, including a grandmother of mine. These are some pieces that are from a collection at the Ralph T. Coe Center for the Arts, and that's like part of the research process. You go in, and luckily with this place, you can actually touch things, and that's really great to get that hand knowledge and understanding. Looking at quill work, my friend America Meredith was so kind to share some of her research photos with me, but you can look at some of this, you see the color schemes, you see the motifs, looking at beadwork, seeing the different forms. And, Anishinaabe people are pretty spread. So there's different, there's like shifts in the sort of forms that people are creating with. So it's good to be kind of aware of those things as well. You can see all these sort of patterns that are in these pieces. Looking at ribbon work, there's a lot of potential inspiration there as well. And again, it's good to try to know what you're looking at too, because you don't want to end up using somebody else's like family like insignia or something like that. So, but these sorts of things are good inspirations for the aesthetics that you can use in your artwork, and which I, use. Looking at textiles, you can see in these woven bags, there's so much rich pattern work that's in here, and that, in creating a graphic design project, I could look at one of these forms and then pull that, and that could become, something that you have on a poster, or like an invitation. More textile patterns, colors. Woodland school is a big thing that is a big part of like Anishinaabe culture. Um, within the last century. And so that's something that informs a lot of artwork in my artwork as well. And we have artists like Norval Morrisseau and Daphne Ojik and many others to thank for this development, which is really based upon the stories and different visual conventions of the culture, but in a very unique way and very individualistic as well. I also look at historic paintings, to get information on different things like clothing and usage of paint and whatnot. One of my personal side hobbies is researching strap dresses, and I collect as many images as possible. So if anybody's curious about this subject, check out my Pinterest at Neebin. Pinterest.com/Neebin, and I have so many photos there. So that's something I use when I'm drawing. Like, I research this and I understand this dress as part of our people. So I encourage you to check that out. And there's just a little example of like, I made a dress as part, I kind of worked into a class project when I was going to IIA at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and, started creating that dress form as a way to kind of understand it and, make it my own. And then there's like West Duty there. I had to put a little celebrity sighting. I look at a lot of online collections and see what they have. Like, we should know, what different institutions have of our peoples, and we deserve access to it. So I definitely encourage looking at that. And if you can go in and look in person, all the better. But there's some really great resources online. And so I look at that. I use a lot of different search terms for things too. Just to, kind of ensure, because in history, things got written all kinds of ways. So I kind of keep an open mind when I'm looking. Anyway, so putting all that together, I'm going to show you some of my professional and personal work. How are we on time? I'm just going to take a look. Okay, 20 minutes. Okay. So kind of jumping into that. These are some Sweetgrass baskets I had made, just the one little teacup and saucer, 2 pictures of that. And I'd never done this before, but my mom had, different baskets and a book that kind of talked about making. And so interesting, like, I think there's some sort of ancestral knowledge when you're making. And that's why I think it's important to create, because like, you never know what your hands are going to tell you, and it's going to start to figure things out. And so this was like my first little basket form that I, had made out of sweetgrass like this. I've done some other things when I was, a kid, but this was like doing this form, and this was for an art show. And I thought, oh, I'm unique. I did this teacup, but I ended up looking at a finding of something from like 100 years ago where somebody had the same idea. So you think you're unique. This is something I came up with, using things like hide and beads. Like, my mom would do a lot of like jewelry, necklaces, earrings, and things like that out of beadwork. And I inherited a bunch of her bead collection. I've gone and bought a bunch of beads myself, but I ended up creating this little bunny, this little lot bunny with the beaded ears and, using hide. And I've done different variations of these bunnies. It's kind of a ode to childhood. One of my first stuffed animals was a rabbit called Wabusa, and the Ojibwe word for rabbit is Wabus. So I have this kind of little long-standing connection with the bunnies, because it's like a comfort thing, right? Like, I think it harks back to being, childhood and feeling loved and safe and secure. So there's a part of me that's about making, with these materials, using familiar materials, but something that's personal to me. This piece, Love and Support, amplifies that. Like, one rabbit is representative of me, and the other one is representative of my best friend, Jonathan Loretto. And it's about our friendship together and the support that we have for each other. Like, I've had, struggled with like mental health, and I had originally made this for a show about mental health. And so I wanted to showcase the positive side of where when you have family and community come together and support you and how important that is for you as a person. And then also this kind of like this little bead tying them together. It's like a little spirit line too, holding them together. I do earrings as well, which is, on the right here. I've got my own on as well. I figured I'd take the time to show off. I call them pillow earrings. This is a piece I had done when I was in school, more than 10 years ago now, bilingual piece about the 7 grandfather teachings, and my younger brother modeled for this. And so having on the back is like, this is a symbol of strength. And then I also, when I was in school before at Oregon State University, I got my brothers to model for a lot of different things, poor things. Like they weren't always happy about it, but, they kind of had to do it. Pull the sibling card, but in this one, I was learning about the cosmology of, the Thunderbird and the underwater panther and how they are, kind of locked into this struggle. And so I wanted them to represent that. So that's what that is, kind of a take on that. And while I was going to school, I also really was asking myself questions about where are the Native graphic designers? What does my culture mean? How do I fit into things? And, it was just kind of like this really important time that really set me off on the path I am today. And so I was sketching things, trying to understand their clothes better, trying to understand their stories better. And so these t-shirt designs were part of that. I learned that, copper mining was really ancient in the Great Lakes area. And I didn't know that, I had heard, kind of, racist things about abilities of Native people. And so this was like a contrast. So I wanted to kind of bring that information forward with the color of the ink that I had used, showing the Thunderbird as this powerful being. And then this design that I had created was like showing all of how the past and the present and the future come together. Like our culture visually changed, of course, with colonization and also adoption of new things. And so, we have florals now that we didn't have before. We have really old imagery, and I feel like it can all tie together and exist because this is a part of our story. And so this kind of led to a piece later where I remixed that t-shirt design and made a poster out of it. And it's called Anishinabe, Who We Are. And, a little updated thing. And I did that while I was an artist in residence at OCAD University. I also look at beadwork motifs for design elements. You can see a border element here where I pulled that from a bandolier bag, inspired by, not direct. I also have done logos that are informed by the culture for different clients. And so Wabajijak Press was informed by the Woodland School. And while this isn't a direct inspiration, the piece by Norval Morrisseau on the right, you can see where that the colors and layering of colors comes into the logo. This is another logo I had done for the Native Justice Coalition. And here are some examples, not direct examples per se, but you can see where I'm pulling from quill work, I'm pulling from woven items, I'm also pulling from Onaman, the red paint that is used in rock art to inform this logo. This is another piece I had done for the Native Justice Coalition, and this one pulls from is inspired by star maps, and it's more of a loose association, but some of that's coming in there, and also having this sort of cosmological kind of schema here as well. With the symbolic petition of Chippewa chiefs, you can see where using these sort of heartline elements are coming into this graphic that I had done, this illustration of this person for a Healing Stories event, and then also this logo for Stacy Sheldon, who is a part of the Crane clan and a known person in Ojibwe community who works with language and other things, but she needed something for her own website. And so you can kind of see where this sort of that heart line is coming into both pieces, that transparency. This is another piece that I had done that pulls from the little heart frames that my own family has, and thinking about like, here's they were wanting to highlight youth. And so you have the beloved youth, right? Within this heart form, and then having these bears as a protective element to them as well. So kind of little layers like that. There's a little watercolor and color pencil illustration that was kind of around MMIW, intended for an event. But in this piece, there's definitely things that are being pulled from this. You have petroglyphs forms coming into the artwork, certain kind of clothing. So like little references like that, I really try to input. For this logo for Ojibwe.net, it's basically based on beadwork on black velvet, which is a part of our culture post-contact. And so you can kind of see like this book in the middle where some of those elements are, and some sketches on the right where I was, reinterpreting different things I was seeing and making them into original compositions. Here's a work that I had done for the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. They had done for the Native Youth Summit in 2020. They had the theme was like Black and Indigenous solidarity. So I created this piece, and this is very intertribal, because you have the girl in the middle wearing like a Pueblo manta and the turquoise jewelry, and then the girl on the right has more like Navajo jewelry. And then the boy on the left, I gave him a little birch bark pendant with a Thunderbird as a protective element, and then bringing the florals in. And I felt like this was like a respectful way I could kind of move through this being, a guest in these lands, recognizing the cultures, or some little bit of the cultures that are here, and then also recognizing our Black Native relatives as well. These are two other illustrations I had done for the Native Justice Coalition, and both of these are LGBTQ themed. On the left is the different genders within Anishinaabe, like thought. So you have the Kwa, the woman, the Inini, the man, the Agakwa, which is similar to like a trans woman or trans feminine person, and then some people could say like a Gawanini, but there's some other words, and I apologize, I should have written down the other terms. But for the person on the right, it's more of like a sort of trans-masculine or butch character. Put a little bit of myself into that one. And then on the right, these are trans people, and so a trans masculine person, a trans feminine person. And I wanted to show kind of to show these individuals in clothing that our ancestors would wear. And I think that's a really important thing, to be like, okay, this trans woman, what should she wear? And she would wear like, she'd probably have the best, Potawatomi blouse to go with her outfit. And so, you can see there's like I was looking at a museum and seeing that and pulling that in to the depiction that I had done, and looking at the fine ribbon work of these women and thinking about how to translate that into my piece. And I think, this is really important. And so my client had used my illustration and then put this, social media graphic together. And it really resonated with people. And I feel like that's a very important thing to show that, Two-Spirit people, LGBTQ people, have always been a part of our communities. And so I want to show that kind of like in love and in a very positive way. And it resonated with people. And that shows to me that there's like more of a need for this. And so, kind of along those lines as well, I took a class to do like fashion illustration. So I'll just show you a few little drawings of that. But I wanted to have this sort of, tomboy kind of warrior character, and, bringing in some other cultural elements. So you have Thunderbird and lightning coming down on this one little jacket. You have these characters that are, have ribbon shirts and different coats that are kind of based on historical coats, but, my own little twist. Another thing where I'm looking at elements of the culture and thinking about somebody who's, gender nonconforming or has multiple facets, and thinking about how do you layer the masculine and the feminine, like taking certain elements of something like, a ribbon dress and having that as a transparency over, like you have a breechcloth. And so just kind of playing with that and thinking about what that might be, in a sense when it comes to gender. Different explorations. And this was a futuristic project where we had to do something that was inspired by comic books and science fiction. And so this was like, here's a little futuristic world. These like warriors have their kind of garb that's influenced. You have these boots that are like a legging and a moccasin combined. So that's just kind of me playing around. I was just thinking about like, being imaginative too, like how you can take things from the culture and also imagine them in new ways as well. And that's partly what some of this stuff is, like old and new. On the left, this is a Two-Spirit person that I depicted. And I had read in a book that young men would tie sweetgrass braids around their neck as a way of like, kind of like a perfume. And I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful mental image. Like, I want to use that somehow. So I put that into this piece just to have that like decorative element. So, here's some sketches and it's a little kind of a self-portrait imaginary, me as a warrior. So kind of playing with all of that. I also have these little bunny characters that I use as well, and incorporate, the florals, looking at the strap dresses and putting that in, the little teeny moccasins. I just love little details like that. And one of these pieces here that's, I think, really representative of this sort of research and sharing. This is Anishinaabe and Pueblo love, which is a metaphor of me living here in the Southwest, and how I feel about living here. And so it's, you have the rabbit on the left wearing a Ojibwe inspired strap dress and leggings and little moccasins. And then the other little bunny is dressed like some of the Pueblo women might be around here. And in fact, this outfit is more inspired by a friend of mine from Santo Domingo. So, kind of showing that sort of togetherness, the resonance, having the Great Lakes Thunderbird underneath the Pueblo rain cloud. And it's really just kind of a way of me showing my love for the people in the place here. Some more little bunny art, just figure I'd share. And this Butch bunny, which is kind of a self-portrait, led to me creating some character designs for Santa Fe Indian Market, which is what my original character designs here, which ended up being translated into 3D by the development team. And so people got to wander around as these two bunnies, Butch Bunny and Femme Bunny, with their Anishinaabe inspired clothing. Well, big part, too, what I'm thinking about is not just designing with aesthetics, but also designing with values and what that might mean. And so a part of what I've done is create free graphics for the community to use. And so a few years ago, I was an artist in residence and I created this floral set. And it's been used by quite a bit of different people. My own tribe has used this. They use this like in their social media and in their newsletter as well. The Royal Ontario Museum used it for their Anishinaabe show. So it's kind of getting out there. And so it's a way of me thinking like from that spirit of generosity, like what does it mean to be Ojibwe? Like, it's important to be thinking about kinship. It's important to be thinking about relationships. It's important to be thinking about giving back and how can I use that, as a designer and artist. And of course, these were the ones that Leah had done and I love them. So I figured I'd include. When I was at the School for Advanced Research earlier this year, this was kind of expanding on the floral idea. And so this is not released yet, but if there's people in the crowd that are interested in this and want to talk more, please get in contact with me. I had created 35 vector graphics, and they're free to use as well. Although I was like working out some of the licensing, trying to figure that out. But in the meantime, if you have a project, just get in touch with me. My process on this was just kind of immersing myself as I do, like reading and watching videos and going and handling artwork, looking at my own personal sketch library and drawing and whatnot. And so these are a couple of the images, again, thinking of the idea of having more two-spirit representation. This is a couple, showing that. This is a Thunderbird with some clouds that were inspired by a piece by a then high schooler in the collection who was Chippewa and going to a school in Santa Fe. So I was like, oh, those little clouds, I'm going to do a little reference to them, for this artwork in that collection. I had this art, kind of the sketch kicking around for a while, and I finally made this into a graphic. Changed up the colors a bit too, though, but this was a piece that pulls from Wampum Belt, is inspired by a Wampum Belt that represents where my people are specifically. So let's see, I think here, so there is like a white reindeer is placed and then there's a sun, right? So having that presented there, I wanted to show that in my drawings. And so that's something that I'll be giving to my nation to use as well. All of this, I'll be forwarding on. But like creating different characters is really important. And so I am kind of developing this set. There'll be more people and representations of people. Um, different medicines, and especially because this was so hard, with the pandemic, it's been really difficult. So I think, like many people, I've been struggling with this sort of reality that we're in. And so a lot of my artwork that I created during this residency turned toward things of a spiritual nature, of a healing nature. And it was, kind of a way to help heal myself too, through this time. And I'm hoping, it'll also help other people down the road as well. So you can kind of see little process sketches, how it gets from there to there. I have a big sketch library. When I work for clients, I have, have all kinds of ideas, and some of them are tossaways, and some are the ones that become like something more, but I keep all of them and think about how I might reinterpret them. So that's, something that came out of that, as well as the sage bundle. And, these as well. And I wanted to make graphics that resonate with, Native peoples in education. There's like a little library with a little bison, because the bison are an important part of a lot of our cultures and foodways. So to have that strength there, because I don't think being Native has to be at odds with academia per se. I think there's ways we can work it out, and ways to make it more accessible to people and more welcoming to people, and also to include our different worldviews and life ways as well. So kind of moving through this, you can see us playing with petroglyphs a little bit here. This rain form, that means like a cloud and rain coming down, and then this curve over there is like the time of day, so that's like in the evening. So you can see the rain coming down and these thunderbirds over, and then this sort of form of different people kind of like coming together. You'll see this with a lot of our Haudenosaunee neighbors too. I've seen it in some Anishinaabe stuff as well, but it's kind of an interesting thing of like people kind of coming together. So I just want to create that graphic. I've done different florals, different design motifs that working with, looking at, again, florals, or looking at things abstractly, like jingle dresses, right? So taking a jingle dress element and using that as a border element. So that's all going to be available for people to use. This canoe, this floral canoe. I love shoes, love moccasins, so had to kind of take this out there, put it out there into the world. I pulled from some past projects, and we're like, this is what we're going to do. And these are actually based on some moccasins that were lent to me by the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I remixed it, put on my own little design, but based on it, they're originally based on a drawing of me wearing them. And then there's these little baby moccasins too, because that's an important part of our communities, is the babies that are coming up. Little duck here. There's a lot of stories about ducks. There's a particular one too where our culture hero Nana Bijou is very hungry, and he tries to get ducks to eat. And so I was a little hungry when I was drawing this, and it turned out a little bit like, a sunny side up egg. I was like, should I keep that? I'm like, no, it's perfect. It's culturally perfect. Looking at, I look at a lot of baskets, and so you can see where some of this is coming into a little macaque form with the floral elements, and remixing, past project and putting into this. I love war clubs. Most of my stuff is peaceful, but I'm like, I have to have my war club. Looking at deer and looking at the things around. This is like a antique store. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna, take a photo and sketch these guys. He looks a little sad. I think I felt for him a little bit. Looking at the different forms too. So with these sorts of things, you can see that heart line, you can see that form line, that inner structure, the sort of visual simplification of like a petroglyph form, right? And so I've been using that and interpreting, we have bears, mama bear and baby bear there, having a beaver, turtle, hummingbird. And that's something I'd like to expand more as well as I move forward. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little look into my artistic process and miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neebin. This was beautiful. I absolutely love your artwork, and I'm always so inspired to just have a company and just or have multiple companies and have your artwork represent all of them. I think you do such a wonderful job of seeing faces and seeing people in our various communities and representing them. And it's just really beautiful to see that. I would love to open the floor for questions. We did put some links in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free. We'll ask folks to unmute themselves, or if you want to use the chat feature, I recommend that as well. Do you find yourself focusing now, I would say over this past year, right, of the pandemic, do you find yourself focusing now mostly in the graphic design element, or are you finding yourself kind of going between different mediums?
I would say, so most of my career, I've done a lot of graphic design, right? We didn't really get into some of that because it would just be too much, but a lot of my work has been kind of intertribal graphic design, stuff for cultural institutions. And so I feel like this past year, I've been kind of exploring, like, in the past couple of years, really, I was like, I want to do more illustration. I want to do more artwork. So I feel like in the past few years, I've started doing that more. I do still have, layout projects that I do as well, but it's something that I'd like to push myself more and get better at. So yeah, I would say, I have leaned more into like the illustrative side in the past while. And certainly, when I was in residence at the School for Advanced Research, that was kind of an opportunity to do that, to be like, okay, now here's my chance to just draw. So that was really good for that.
Great.
Okay, so I got a message from Shondine. So Neebin, great job. How do you use Pinterest as a source? I find great archival pictures there, but rarely sources. I think it's one of those things where I use it as a starting point. Like, again, you have to be kind of careful because things are often not attributed properly, but I feel like it's a good way to be like, okay, where is this from? If there's a link to a website, that's really helpful. Yeah, it's tricky. I think you really do, if you're going to be doing anything more seriously, like, I think it's good to try to look for, you're going to have to filter out a lot of the stuff where it hasn't been properly attributed. But one thing you can also do, there's like reverse lookups too on Google for Google searches that you can do as well. That might be able to bring the source that you're looking for as well too. Like, sometimes it could be a starting point for something. It kind of depends, but there's also museums on there that post work as well, in galleries and things like that. So I think following those sources, following people who are known to be maybe a little more on the research side, because I know there's other Native artists that use it as a source of inspiration, or even researchers a little bit. So I think looking at those and kind of seeing, yeah, I think you really want to look at what's around. If they don't have a source, then, kind of a question mark on it, and don't, like, maybe that might lead somewhere, but be careful about it, because you want to make sure you, especially if you're doing cultural reclamation stuff, it should be, more accurate.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that question. I have a question here from someone who has to step off. She said, I noticed the bears with the heart lines are similar to the Zuni bear, and I am curious how your depictions of the bears are received. And she goes on to say, for her, I see it as an affirmation that we are all connected despite geographic separators.
Yeah, I think that's something that is really interesting too. When I was at the School for Advanced Research, they have a huge pottery collection there. And that's something where I was like, there's definitely echoes, of that. And so I was doing some reading about some of the like the red on the heart and the heart line and all that. And some of what I was reading was talking about how like a medicine person, like someone may come to a medicine person to have success in the hunt. And so there could be a depiction where you have that red rubbed in to be as a way of like giving the hunter good success in the hunt. And so there, I think, are maybe some similar things as well for other people. Um, it is really interesting how that is like a common thing. But yeah, there's a tie to hunting practices with that. Something which I could learn a little bit more about. But I think, yeah, that it kind of makes sense. It's interesting to see the echoes because I think, it's always possible to like people might have been sharing stuff a really long time ago as well. And we know that we had different travel routes in different places. So, just, I mean, that's a theoretical me being like, I wonder, but I like seeing different connections too and seeing where things might be really different or really similar in different ways.
I
It's
have
also, oh,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead. No, go
It's
ahead.
also like a life force. So with some depictions of people, sometimes it's like them being their aliveness and their power, right? So there's also that as well. Which you'll kind of see in some of the depictions of people like singing or something. It's like kind of coming from here. From my memory, apologies if I get anything wrong, like everything's kind of been in there.
I have another question here, and that is, does your Sweetgrass teacup hold liquid?
No, I have to weave that a little tighter. I think the saucer might be able to do it, but the weave is so loose. Let me see. Let me grab it and I'll show you. So with the saucer, it's like pretty tight, right? I wouldn't necessarily vouch for its water tightness. I think, for something like that, you'd probably want to have like some sort of pitch thing. So it's really more of a decorative thing. But with this one, it's a little like loosely woven. So I wouldn't count on it holding liquid. You can kind of see. So it's a decorative object, yeah, a little less utilitarian.
It's absolutely beautiful. And thank you for bringing it out, because looking by the picture, I couldn't tell if it was teeny tiny or regular teacup size. So it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I do have another. Oh, go ahead. Oh, your bunnies.
Yeah, so they're little too. I like miniature things, small things.
I have another question here. If people are interested in purchasing some of your art, where could they go to?
Ooh, I do need to set up a website, which is like I kind of have in like the background. Otherwise, sometimes I do some art shows, but if you do have a specific interest, I would say go ahead and send me an email. Yeah, I do need to monetize. People have been after me for that. So I do use a Square, Square Up, and but I haven't launched like the website with things to buy yet. But yeah, get in touch with me if you had something in particular you have in mind.
Great. I love your little bunnies. So I may be in touch with you about those. I do have another question here. And that is, what is your dream project or project you're really excited about right now?
I do have a cool design project where I'm working on a catalog for a museum, and that's like a big deal because it's one of my biggest projects to date. For like a dream project, someday I would love to get into creating like animated videos that are culturally based. And so to have something like to have all these sorts of visuals and then also to tell the story, that might be kind of futuristic and also have two-spirit elements. I'd love to have something that kind of combined all that, combined music, combined spoken word, combined visuals. That's like my kind of dream. Before I've wanted to have an Ojibwe metal band. And so, that would be cool too. I'd also take that.
That sounds like a very cool project, and I would definitely listen. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Or it seems like if you want to contact Neebin directly, you can do so through their website. And of course, as I do with all programs, I will put my email in the chat. So if you have any questions for me, and you want me to pass them along, I am happy to do that as well. But yes, thank you, Leah Bergen, for putting that in. Neebin's contact information. But I think with that, I really want to say Katapatash Neebin, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us and showing us your amazing artwork. And I think that I also want to say Katapatanamu to everyone who has come this evening. Please be on the lookout in a few days for a recording of this talk in your email inbox, and please feel free to share it with others who you think may enjoy it. And also, again, remember to check back at our events page on our website to see the fall programming that we have coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll be having a screening and fun chat with the Chango brothers, Diego and Mateo Romero. And also we are going to have a Dia de los Muertos celebration, and there will be some Zoom components and also our first in-person components for the first time in a year and a half. So we're looking forward to those. Again, the link is right in the chat, but we encourage you to check back with us, and please go check out Neebin's website and their Pinterest. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. And I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy your weekends.
Miigwech.
Miigwech. Thank you so much.